This is Fountain
Every
Street
week I find
Church.
it hard to find the best ones, but somehow, like I said, you'll hear what I'm trying to say even when the words
Here,
are
we strive to free the mind, grow the soul, and change the world. Here, there is freedom to doubt and freedom to believe. Here, you can find a house of prayer for all people.
The swallow up Jonah.
Welcome to Fountain Street Church. Join us on the journey.
Here, and my wife has once again found the All Christmas Carol All the Time station. So I'm girding up my Advent loins, as it were. But in other facets of our life, we had a really wonderful Diwali dinner here, and if you did not eat and celebrate with us on Wednesday with the Hindu community, you missed a good food and a good time, and I hope you will be back next year. And after all, we should remember that before there were pilgrims and turkeys, there were Ottawa and Potawatomi and ghost suppers taking place around here, but I'll tell you more about that in a few minutes. In other words, we're blessed. We're blessed that even with winter, we can stay warm, that Christmas has so much to offer that we can start celebrating as early as we like and we don't run out until January, that we have, most of us, enough to eat and a warm place to live. But we also need to remember, I think, that even here in our community of abundance, of people of good fortune for the most part, there are those of us here in this room and in this place who need a job, who would prefer to have a long-term home and perhaps a better sense of their own health, and who knows how many are struggling to find hope. Yes, even here. And the few words that we share here, certainly my own, will not make them come about, and yet we need them just the same. But only if they're wise and good, which is why every week I say, may these words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be found true in thy sight, O thou who art my rock and my redeemer. For only if it speaks the truth that I know is true for me, if not for all, will it mean anything to anyone at all. I've been thinking about my mother-in-law recently. Now, I should point out that my relationship to my late mother-in-law was more stereotypical than unusual. She was never quite fond of the notion of her only daughter getting married at all. And she found it astonishing that two such magnificent grandchildren could have such a lout as for a father, but somehow miracles do happen. But we found a rapprochement over the years. We really did. And we would take Thanksgiving with her every year, she being a widow and my wife being an only child. And when we lived on the East Coast, that would mean we would get in the car there the day before Thanksgiving and drive down from New York City down through New Jersey and across the turnpikes and the bridges and over the rivers and through the various woods to Baltimore, where she lived and where we all grew up. We would remember stopping at the Vince Lombardi rest area near the Meadowlands, where we would all discharge and take on the necessary fluids, and then the long day of cooking with all of its smells and hubbub, and then the TV parades that we would watch with only half-hearted interest. Then there would always be the things on the table that meant it was Thanksgiving as opposed to some other dinner. When else are you going to eat sweet potatoes by choice, really? Some of us have learned to love them since, I should point out, but as a child, you know what I mean, that they came once a year and you kept looking for the marshmallow bits to kind of make them go down more easily. And then there was, at least in our families, because we grew up where we did in a town, in an area saturated with German influence, there was always sauerkraut, which appeared once a year. And then again, we ate it more for ritual purposes than because we loved it. And we always ate too much. Yes, don't you always eat a little too much? The dressing and the bread and the turkey and the gravy and the mashed potatoes, so that the next day, if the weather were good, it was wise to go outside and rake some leaves and perhaps even clean the gutters before the ice fell, use up some of those calories. And it's been 10 years since I've done that, and still I remember it with absolute clarity. And I bet you have memories just like it. Memories from your youth or even your adulthood. And that's really the major part of why we do it when we think about it. All that pilgrim stuff really is just an excuse, and it's a very late excuse, in fact. Indeed, yes, they did have a great feast, and we can all remember with some patriotic fervor how wonderful it was that they sat down with the Indians. But I'm remembering this passage that I encountered from Mark Twain that I think speaks to that element. He said, Thanksgiving Day, a function which originated in New England 2 or 3 centuries ago, when those people recognized that they really had something to be thankful for if they succeeded in exterminating their neighbors, the Indians, during the previous 12 months, instead of getting exterminated by their neighbors, the Indians. Thanksgiving Day became a habit for the reason that in the course of time, as the years drifted on, it was perceived that the exterminating had ceased to be mutual and was all on the white man's side, consequently on the Lord's side. Hence, it was proper to thank the Lord for it and extend the usual annual compliments. This is what Mark Twain said. I read of our compact version, it's anonymous, that says, the following should be our greeting on Thanksgiving Day. Happy we took your land and killed your people day. And I point this out because we forget that that story is the root of a great deal of anxiety in our culture. But I'm glad that we don't do that as fervently as we could. That the great feast of Thanksgiving was only labeled patriotic and pilgrim-like much later. In fact, it was not until 1863 that there was an official national Thanksgiving Day. It was during the Civil War, as you can remember from your history days, and Abraham Lincoln, in the midst of the Civil War, called upon the American people on the last Thursday in November to give thanks for all that they were blessed with. In the middle of the Civil War, a time that has never been so difficult since. And it takes almost another century, 1942, until Congress makes it a federal holiday so that people can actually take the day off. And of course, all that presidential turkey pardoning doesn't start until Truman comes along. The pilgrim thing, in other words, crept into a process and a pattern that was there before. We can thank Sarah Josepha Hale, whose Ladies Magazine in the 19th century lobbied for Thanksgiving Day and pointed out the Pilgrims as their good example because she wanted people to be more like her New England families, which were good and proper and ate appropriate foods, as opposed to those people in the South who were all sorts of bacchanalia-like and had unwholesome holidays. I'm not kidding. She wanted us all to be good Union New Englanders, and that's why we all eat turkey, even though we don't really know why. It's because she told us to. If it were really a pilgrim thing, we would do it like the Pilgrims did. They didn't do it in their homes, after all. They all got together and they essentially had a potluck supper to which they invited the neighbors. But we do it in our homes because ultimately, Thanksgiving is about survival. We don't think of it that way because we can be pretty sure that by the end of the day, most of us will still be alive. We are blessed with good health and wealth and health and all those good things. But survival was good luck back in those days. And I don't mean so many years ago. In 1863, you were lucky if all your children grew up. You were lucky if you had enough to eat. Survival was something that you celebrated. And autumn in ancient days before Freon and all the other benefits we enjoy was the time when you either ate your animals or you sold them because you were not going to feed them all the way through the winter. And so animals were slaughtered and crops were put up, and you had to eat as much as you could before A, it went bad, and B, you needed the extra fat under the skin to keep you warm before they had central heating. In short, it's been going on forever, this eating in the fall, which is why we can find people doing this sort of stuff all over history and culture, and not just in America or just at Thanksgiving. Rituals of gratitude are almost everywhere. They may happen at any season, but a lot of them happen in the autumn. And the one thing they all have in common is remembering as well as eating. The way we sit down at our tables and remember what it was like when we were children, when Grandma sat there and Grandpa sat there, and how we always remember how they ate, not just what they ate too. And don't we always tell stories about who wants just a sliver of pie but really means 2 or 3 of them ultimately as the day goes on, and who always wants more gravy. And so we tell stories, and that's as much a part of the ritual as eating.